Hi, welcome to this video about technical accuracy for GCSE English language. By the end of the video, you should be able to proofread for sentence punctuation, write sentences of different types, structure and length, be able to proofread for some basic grammar errors, be aware to proofread for common spelling errors, and be able to find alternatives for vocabulary. Here is the mark scheme for technical accuracy. It focuses on sentence punctuation and a range of punctuation within sentences as well as between sentences, using different sentence forms, getting your grammar right, your spelling, and a wide vocabulary. Here's a basic checklist of all the things that you should consider including in a Paper 1 Question 5 question. Here is the checklist again with a few replacements. When you're doing Paper 2 Question 5, non-fiction, you should always use a rhetorical question, direct address, and quotation if you can. That's a bit different from Paper 1 Question 5. This is probably one of the most important parts of spelling, punctuation and grammar, sentence punctuation. You must punctuate your sentences properly. Please use a full stop, a question mark, an exclamation mark, a semicolon or a joining word between your sentences. Don't use a comma or nothing. Semicolons are really easy. They're used between complete sentences that are related in meaning instead of joining words, and they're used between list elements which contain commas. Here are 4 sentences. Each pair of sentences is separated by a semicolon because the first sentence and the second sentence in the pair are related in meaning. Here we have some full stops as normal, an exclamation mark for emphasis, and a question with a question mark. You need to show that you can use commas accurately. Commas are used between items in a list, before, after, or around discourse markers such as on the other hand or however, before, after, or around extra information, which isn't a full sentence on its own, before or after quotations, always before the quotations mark, and before some joining words, for example and, but, or, and so. You would also use a comma between full sentences when the joining word is at the start of the sentence. This page shows how to use joining words. You can join whole sentences with and, or, but, or so. If you have a joining word at the start of your sentence, such as the 2 ifs we have here, then the 2 sentences are separated by a comma. You must use a joining word if you're going to separate your sentences with a comma. You can't just use a comma. Some joining words in compound sentences are usually written with a comma before them. These are for, and, nor, but, or, yet, and so. And together they form a mnemonic, which is fanboys. You need to show that you can use commas accurately. Commas are used between items in a list, before, after, or around discourse markers, such as on the other hand or however, before, after, or around extra information, which isn't a full sentence on its own, before or after quotations, always before the quotations mark, and before some joining words, for example, and, but, or, and so. You would also use a comma between full sentences when the joining word is at the start of the sentence. Remember that commas in a list are between all of the items except for the last two, so you don't put them before and or in a list. This is exactly the same as the use of commas around discourse markers. The extra information is in bold. The main point of the sentence is not in bold. If your discourse marker's at the beginning of the sentence, put the comma after it. If your discourse marker's in the middle of the sentence, put a comma on either end of it. If the discourse marker's at the end of the sentence, put the comma before it. Remember, other punctuation always comes before quotation marks, whether it's a comma, a full stop, or a question mark, and that includes at the end of sentences, so your quotation would be outside the full stop to the right. Remember this? And remember this. Quotation marks are used around direct speech, and any punctuation that goes with what you're writing inside the quotation marks needs to go before the quotation marks, including punctuation leading into the quotation, as you can see. Apostrophes are not used for plurals. If you want to say kittens or apples or tables, don't put an apostrophe in. Apostrophes are used for contractions, which is missing letters such as can't, don't, wouldn't, or o'clock. Apostrophes are used for possession, and the apostrophe always goes on the owner, such as Bob's hat or the boy's mother. If there are two boys, then the apostrophe goes after the S. You do use an apostrophe for it's in it is or it has. Although you use an apostrophe in other possessive, you don't use one in its possessive. If you want to check whether it should have an apostrophe or it shouldn't, say it is. If that fits into the sentence, put in an apostrophe. If it doesn't, then don't. To summarise, apostrophes are used for possession, contractions, including it is or it has. They're not used for plurals or its possessive. Lastly, if you're unsure about whether you need an apostrophe, don't put one in. As you can see, there are lots of ways of starting sentences. Try and mix them up to give variety. As you can see, there are lots of different reasons for using different sorts of sentences. So you can emphasize, vary your sentences, which is very important, to explain, report dialogue and link ideas. Remember that there's a list of misspelt words on the first white page of your exercise book. You can use that to practice your spellings. Here are some important words which you will need to write your reading questions. Please make sure you're familiar with them. There are different ways to make your writing formal. One of them is not to use apostrophes. Use more sophisticated verbs rather than two-part phrasal verbs, and make your sentences longer. Hopefully you're now more familiar with sentence punctuation, different types of sentences, grammar errors, how to practice your spelling, and alternatives to your normal vocabulary. Try and develop all these skills ready for your exams.